All right, welcome. Today, we are diving into one of the most powerful tools in the entire AI toolkit, Bayesian Networks. This is how we teach machines to think, to reason, when the world is messy, uncertain, and full of missing pieces. Let's get right into it.
So let's start with a big question, right? How can a machine possibly reason when it doesn't have all the facts? Think about it. If you don't know for sure if a burglary happened, or if an earthquake just struck, how do you figure out the odds that your alarm should be blaring? How do you connect those dots in a logical way?
Well, you could try the brute force way. You could literally create a giant, monstrous table with the probability of every single combination of events. But as you can see on the left there, that's a complete nightmare. We call this the FJPD trap, the full joint probability distribution. And it's a trap because it's not just tedious, its complexity grows exponentially.
And when I say exponentially, I mean it. To really put that into perspective for you, if you have just 30 simple true or false variables, we're talking simple stuff like, is the sprinkler on? You would need to calculate and store over 1 billion different probabilities. It's not possible. No computer can handle that for any real-world problem.
So clearly, we need a smarter way to do this. What if instead of tracking every single possibility, we just focused on what actually matters? What if we could just draw a map of how events actually influence each other, focusing only on those direct causal links?
And that elegant map, that's exactly what a Bayesian network is. It's a clean, intuitive, and compact way to represent that ridiculously huge probability table. So let's pop the hood and take a look at its anatomy.
Okay, first up, the basic building blocks are these circles, or nodes. It's simple. Each node just represents a variable in our world. It could be an event, like a burglary or an earthquake, or it could be a state, like the alarm going off. These are the key things we're trying to reason about.
Then you've got the arrows, which we call directed edges. These show direct influence. See the arrow going from burglary to alarm? That just means what you think it means. A burglary can directly cause the alarm to go off. It's a super clear and simple map of cause and effect.
And when you put it all together, the whole structure is a directed acyclic graph, or a DAG. Now, the most important word there is acyclic. It just means there are no loops. You can't have the alarm causing a burglary that then causes the alarm again. That makes no sense, right? This keeps the logic clean, flowing in one direction, from cause to effect.
But you might be wondering, how strong are these connections? That's where these little tables come in. These are the conditional probability tables, or CPTs. You can think of them as the brains of the whole operation. They put actual numbers on these relationships. This one here tells us the exact probability of the alarm ringing given whether or not a burglary or an earthquake just happened.
And this all leads us to the network's absolute superpower, something called conditional independence. It sounds complicated, but the idea is incredibly simple. It just means that if you want to figure out the probability of the alarm going off, you only need to look at its direct causes, its parents, which are burglary and earthquake. You don't have to worry about anything else further up the chain. This is the killer insight that lets us slash that list of 1 billion probabilities down to just a handful.
So, okay, we've got this amazingly efficient tool. But, like any powerful tool, it's only as good as how you build it. And this brings us to our first major challenge. You've got to get the order right. Just look at the difference here. On the left, the network is built logically, causally, from causes to effects. Burglary causes alarm. The result? A beautiful, simple graph that only needs 10 numbers to work. But on the right, we built it backwards, from effects to causes, and look what happens. It's a tangled, complicated mess that needs 31 numbers to describe the exact same situation.
So the takeaway here is a golden rule. Always, always build your network following the flow of time and cause and effect. Because, as the source material puts it perfectly, a bad ordering completely destroys the very efficiency that makes these networks so special to begin with.
Okay, so we've built a beautiful, efficient network. We did it the right way. Now we face the next gauntlet. How do we actually ask it questions and get answers? This whole process is called inference.
Now, the most obvious way to do this is called enumeration. You basically just trace through every possible path in the network. But it has a huge, glaring flaw. This algorithm is, well, it's kind of dumb. It wastes a massive amount of time recalculating the exact same values over and over and over and over again.
So, a much smarter method is something called variable elimination. It's clever because it remembers its work.
It stores and reuses those calculations, so it's a huge improvement. And for a moment you think, great, we've solved it. But it turns out, even this smarter approach is about to hit a massive wall. And here it is, the computational wall. It turns out that for the big, loopy, complex networks, the kind that actually model the real world, getting a perfectly exact answer is proven to be NP hard. Now, in plain English, that means it's practically impossible. The problem grows so big, so fast, that no computer on Earth could solve it in a reasonable amount of time. Game over for exact answers.
And this forces us to make a really critical pivot. We have to make a trade-off. We have to give up on the dream of getting a perfect 100% mathematically exact answer. And in exchange, we get something we can actually compute. A pretty good enough approximate answer.
So one of the first ideas for getting an approximate answer is called rejection sampling. The idea is you generate a ton of random scenarios, and then you just throw away any that don't match the evidence you have. But its fatal flaw is pretty obvious, right? If you're looking for something rare, you're going to be throwing away almost all of your work. It is shockingly inefficient. So that leads us to much smarter sampling methods. Things like likelihood weighting, which is clever enough to make sure every single sample it generates is useful. No more wasted effort. And then you have even more advanced stuff, like Gibbs sampling, which intelligently wanders through all the possibilities, getting closer and closer to the right answer. This whole journey that we've been on, from building the network to asking it questions, it really all comes down to one single fundamental concept, this grand trade-off between being perfectly exact and being efficient enough to get an answer at all.
And this chart lays it all out perfectly. On one side, you have your exact algorithms, like enumeration and variable elimination. They're precise, they're guaranteed to be correct, but they will eventually hit that computational wall and grind to a halt. And on the other side, you have the approximate methods. They give up that guarantee of perfection, but in return, they give you speed and scale. They're what we can actually use on the messy, complex problems of the real world.
And that really brings us to the single biggest takeaway from all of this. Real-world AI, the stuff that's changing our lives, isn't about mathematical purity. It's about making smart, practical compromises. Exactness is beautiful in theory, but it's often impossible. Approximation is what actually gets the job done.
So I'm going to leave you with this final question, which I think is really at the heart of so much of modern AI. In a complicated world that's filled with uncertainty, what's actually more valuable? A perfect answer that you can never finish calculating, or a pretty good answer that you can actually use?